All right, we are coming up on 8 o'clock. Just a little bit over, but we had to let ads run their course and be a terrible, terrible tragedy for ads to be running while we're getting started. So, let's settle in. Get comfortable, grab a book, grab a drink, pull up a nice comfy chair, because we've got a bit of comfort reading tonight. Welcome back. This is our first night with a new book, and I have mislabeled my drink. I see it now. How dare I mislabel my whiskeys? Anyway, we are getting started with a brand new, to us anyway, book. A return to form with Mark Twain in A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Now, I think this is the unabridged title. There's a few different ways that it's come across. In some book covers, it's just a Yankee in King Arthur's Court. In one very 80s fantasy style cover I saw, it was much longer. It's like out of the way dragons and wyverns and whatever. It was a little extra. I did really like that title. Originally it was just a Yankee. Okay, that's interesting because I'm seeing both right now. The Gutenberg title has it as A Connecticut Yankee, but the actual book cover title in the same file is a Yankee. So it's like, it could be either way. Went with the longer. We might shorten it because, man, oh man, the adding on the Connecticut part surprisingly does a number on the character counts on my Bluesky posts. Was, as I go through what we're starting to read, I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have a whole lot of room left to comment. What's going on? Oh, wait, hang on. I even had to leave off the hashtag. I usually like to have the book title and the author title as hashtags. There was no way. No way at all. But, as I mentioned and tried to make a fun little side joke, we have read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. We've read Le Morte d'Arthur. What happens when you meet them in the middle? Blend them together, mix it up in the pot, and see what comes out. Well, it's not quite that, because Tom Sawyer was a Southern boy, a good old lad. But we're most certainly more of the Northern persuasion in this case. So, but the idea's there. The spirit rings true. Mark Twain writing about King Arthur. I couldn't think of a match more unlikely, but more just right. If you've read any sort of modern isekai trash, I love my isekai trash, but it's trash. This will probably seem familiar. If you've read, I don't know, a Kid in King Arthur's Court, or seen the movie A Kid in King Arthur's Court, which is obviously a reference to this. Exactly. Yeah, we were. Yeah, we. Same thoughts, just across the internet. All right. This should be a good book nonetheless. It should be silly. It should be irreverent, satirical, a little bit of a commentary here and there. Maybe some not quite so obscure references to things like trying to bring civilization and being held back by the elites. As if that had ever happened before. Oh no. So, let's settle in and get started on this new adventure with an old friend. I do like the various cover arts that I've seen for this book. There's the very classic styling, and the one that I use for the thumbnail for YouTube and the offline image for Twitch with the green cover. But there's some that are just like, there's so many different cover pages for this, and they all kind of bring something else to focus. There's some where the Yankee is almost Randian styled, where he's very strong jaw, staring off into the horizon, and like he's a powerful figure. And then there's others where he looks like a buffoon. So it's interesting to see when and where it's published and how things are presented. This is a nice middle ground and probably a little bit closer to the original. And yes, you're right, a little bit of Twain satire is probably exactly what the doctor ordered. Alright, let's go ahead and get to it. This one has a little bit of a preface I'd seen as I was looking ahead and preparing, but I did want to get the cover in on this one. So, this is Mark Twain's A Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Here's a little bit more of the leaf art there. Did they spoil it and put his real name in with alongside the pseudonym? Gutenberg, how dare you? Alright, nearly there. Okay. Think. There we are. Okay, well, hang on. Where's it said? Where does it come in? Where's it actually start? For Christ's sake. Probably Stranger's History. Well, we might as well just take it straight from the top, the word of explanation, and go. I think this is Twain talking, but we'll just, it's only a page. If it's a little bit of preamble and preface, so be it. All right. A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. A word of explanation. I was in Warwick Castle that I came across it was in Warwick Castle that I came across the curious stranger whom I am going to talk about. He attracted me by three things: his candid simplicity, his marvelous familiarity with ancient armor, and the restfulness of his company. For he did all the talking. Okay, those are actually pretty nice sometimes, where you just sit and listen. We fell together, as modest people will, in the tail of the herd that was being shown through, and he at once began to say things which interested me. As he talked along, softly, pleasantly, flowingly, he seemed to drift away, imperceptibly, out of this world and time, and into some remote era, in this old, forgotten country. And so he gradually wove such a spell about me that I seemed to move among the spectres and shadows and dust and mold of a grey antiquity, holding speech with a relic of it. Exactly as I would speak of my nearest personal friends or enemies, or my most familiar neighbours. He spoke of Sir Bedivere, Sir Bors de Ganis, Sir Launcelot of the Lake, Sir Galahad, and all the other great names of the Table Round, and how old, unspeakably old and faded and dry and musty and ancient he came to look as he went on. Presently, he turned to me and said, just as one might speak of the weather, or any other common matter, "You know about transmigration of souls?" do you know about transposition of epochs and bodies? I said I had not heard of it. He was so little interested, just as when people speak of the weather, that he did not notice whether I made him any answer or not. There was half a moment of silence, immediately interrupted by the droning voice of the salaried cicerone. Ancient hauberk, date of the 6th century, time of King Arthur and the Round Table, said to have belonged to the knights of Sir Sagramore le Desirous. Observe the round hole through the chainmail in the left breast. Can't be accounted for. Supposed to have been done with a bullet since the invention of firearms, perhaps maliciously by Cromwell's soldiers. My acquaintance smiled. Not a modern smile, but one that must have gone out of general use many, many centuries ago, and muttered, apparently to himself, Wit ye well, I saw it done. Then, after a pause, added, I did it myself. By the time I recovered from the electric surprise of this remark, he was gone. All that evening, I sat by my fire at the Warwick Arms, steeped in a dream of the olden time, while the rain beat upon the windows and the wind roared about the eaves and corners. From time to time, I dipped into old Sir Thomas Malory's enchanting book, and fed at its rich feast of prodigies and adventures, breathed in the fragrance of its obsolete names, and dreamed again. Midnight being come at length, I read another tale for a nightcap, from which here follows, to wit, how Sir Lancelot slew 2 giants, and made a castle free. Anon withal came there upon him 2 great giants, well armed, all save the heads, with 2 horrible clubs in their hands. Sir Lancelot put his shield afore him, and put the stroke away of one giant, and with his sword he clave his head asunder. When his fellow saw that, he ran away, as he were wood, demented, for fear of the horrible strokes, and Sir Lancelot after him with all his might, and smote him on the shoulder, and clave him to the middle. Then Sir Lancelot went into the hall, and there came afore him 60 ladies and damsels, and all kneeled unto him, and thanked God and him of their deliverance. For, sir, said they, the most part of us have been here for this 7 year their prisoner. And we have worked all manner of silk works for our meat, and we are all great gentlewomen born, and blessed be the time, knight, that ever thou wert born. For thou hast done the most worship that ever did knight in the world, that we will bear record. And we all pray you to tell us your name, that we may tell our friends, who delivered us out of prison. Fair damsels, he said, my name is Sir Lancelot de Lake. And so he departed from them, and betaught them unto God. And then he mounted upon his horse, and rode into many strange and wild countries, and through many waters and valleys, and evil was he lodged. And at the last, by fortune, him happened against a knight to come to a fair courtelage, and therein he found an old gentlewoman that lodged him with a good will, and there he had good cheer for him and his horse. And when time was, his host brought him into a fair garret over the gate to his bed. There Sir Lancelot unarmed him, and set his harness by him, and went to bed, and anon he fell on sleep. So soon after there came one on horseback, and knocked at the gate in great haste. And when Sir Lancelot heard this, he rose up, and looked out at the window, and saw by the moonlight 3 knights come riding after that one man, and all 3 lashed on him at once with swords. And that one knight turned on them knightly again, and defended him. Truly, said Sir Lancelot, yonder one knight shall I help, for it were shame for me to set 3 knights on one, and if he be slain, I am partner of his death. And therewith he took his harness, and went out at a window by a sheet, down to the 4 knights. And then Sir Lancelot said on high, "Turn you knights unto me, and leave your fighting with that knight." And then they all three left Sir Kay, and turned unto Sir Launcelot. And there began great battle, for they alight all three, and strake many strokes at Sir Launcelot, and assailed him on every side. Then Sir Kay dressed him for to have holpen Sir Launcelot. "Nay, sir," said he, "I will none of your help. Therefore, as ye will have my help, let me alone with them." Sir Kay, for the pleasure of the knight, suffered him for to do his will, and so stood aside. And then anon, within 6 strokes, Sir Launcelot had stricken them to the earth. And then they all three cried, "Sir Knight, we yield us unto you as men of might matchless." "As to that," said Sir Launcelot, "I will not take your yielding unto me, but so that ye yield you unto Sir Kay the Seneschal. On that covenant I will save your lives, and else not." "Fair knight," said they, that were we loath to do, for as for Sir Kay, we chased him hither, and had overcome him had ye not been. Therefore, to yield us unto him, it were no reason." "Well, as to that," said Sir Launcelot, "advise you well, for ye may choose whether ye will die or live. For an ye be yielden, it shall be unto Sir Kay." "Fair knight," then they said, "in saving our lives we will do as thou commandest us." "Then shall ye," said Sir Launcelot, "on Whitsunday next coming go unto the court of King Arthur, and there shall ye yield you unto Queen Guinevere, and put you all three in her grace and mercy, and say that Sir Kay sent you thither to be her prisoners." On the morn Sir Launcelot arose early, and left Sir Kay sleeping. And Sir Launcelot took Sir Kay's armour and his shield, and armed him, and so he went to the stable, and took his horse, and took his leave of his host, and so he departed. Then soon after arose Sir Kay, and missed Sir Launcelot, and then he espied that he had his armour and his horse. Now, by my faith, I know well that he will grieve some of the court of King Arthur, for on him knights will be bold, and deem that it is I, and that will beguile them. And because of his armour and shield, I am sure I shall ride in peace. And then soon after departed Sir Kay, and thanked his host. As I laid the book down, there was a knock at the door, and my stranger came in. I gave him a pipe and a chair, and made him welcome. I also comforted him with a hot Scotch whisky, gave him another one, then still another, hoping always for his story. After a 4th persuader, he drifted into it himself, in a quite simple and natural way. So, I knew, before we really get into the story, I was kind of making a joke when we were saying this is a twist of Mark Twain and Lamort d'Arthur, but a little bit more on the nose than I thought, considering that whole last passage was lifted and dropped in straight from Lamort d'Arthur. I guess if you're going to be writing a story set in Arthurian lore, it's probably the best place to the most, I won't say the most authentic, authoritative place, because Thomas Mallory kind of pulled things together, mishmashed, picked in pieces from folklore from across Europe. But he's pretty well respected. But yeah, a little bit more on the nose than I thought. Alright, let's continue. The Stranger's History. I am an American. I was born and reared in Hartford, in the state of Connecticut. Anyway, just over the river, in the country. So I am a Yankee of the Yankees, and practical. Yes, and nearly barren of sentiment, I suppose. Or poetry, in other words. My father was a blacksmith. My uncle was a horse doctor, and I was both. Along at first. Then I went over to the great arms factory and learned my real trade. Learned all there was to it. Learned to make everything. Guns, revolvers, cannons, boilers, engines, all sorts of labor-saving machinery. Why, I could make anything a body wanted. Anything in the world. It didn't make any difference what, and if there wasn't any quick newfangled way to make a thing, I could invent one, and do it as easy as rolling off a log. I became head superintendent, had a couple of 1,000 men under me. Well, a man like that is a man that is full of fight, that goes without saying. A couple of 1,000 rough men under one has plenty of that sort of amusement. I had, anyway, at last met my match, and I got my dose. It was during a misunderstanding conducted with crowbars that with a fellow we used to call Hercules. He laid me out with a crusher alongside the head that made everything crack. Damn, a crowbar to the head will do that. And seemed to spring every joint in my skull and make it overlap its neighbor. Then the world went out in darkness. I didn't feel anything more. Didn't know anything at all. At least, for a while. Ah yes, man's man, engineer, son of a blacksmith, and ready to take on the world, leading men, and he gets knocked upside the head with a crowbar in a misunderstanding. Yes. Oh, that's right. Twain has a lot of these, the in-page illuminations. It's kind of hard to see here, but it is just the sort of the story being told up in the smoke from their pipes. When I came to again, I was sitting under an oak tree, on the grass, with a whole beautiful and broad country landscape all to myself. Nearly. Not entirely. For there was a fellow on horse, looking down on me. A fellow fresh out of a picture book. He was in old-time iron armor from head to heel, with a helmet on his head the shape of a nail keg with slits in it. And he had a shield, and a sword, and a prodigious spear, and his horse had armor on too, and a steel horn projecting from his forehead, and gorgeous red and green silk trappings that hung down all around him like a bedquilt, nearly to the ground. "Fair sir, will ye just," said this fellow. Will I which? "Will ye try a passage of arms for land or lady, or for—" "What are you giving me?" I said. "Get along back to your circus, or I'll report you." Not having any of it already. Now, what does this man do but fall back a couple of 100 yards and then come rushing at me as hard as he could tear, with his nail keg bent down nearly to his horse's neck, and his long spear pointed straight ahead. I saw he meant business, so I was up the tree when he arrived. He allowed that I was his property, the captive of his spear. There was argument on his side, and the bulk of the advantage, so I judged it best to humor him. We fixed up an agreement whereby I was to go with him, and he was not to hurt me. I came down, and we started away. I walked by the side of his horse, and we marched comfortably along through glades and over brooks which I could not remember to have seen before, which puzzled me and made me wonder. And yet, we did not come to any circus or sign of a circus, so I gave up the idea of a circus and concluded that he was from an asylum. But we never came to an asylum. So I was up a stump, as you may say. I asked him how far we were from Hartford. He said he had never heard of the place, which I took to be a lie, but allowed it to go at that. At the end of an hour, we saw a faraway town sleeping in a valley by a winding river, and beyond it, on a hill, a vast gray fortress with towers and turrets, the first I had ever seen out of a picture. Bridgeport? Said I, pointing. Camelot, said he. My stranger had been showing signs of sleepiness. He caught himself nodding now and smiled one of those pathetic, obsolete smiles of his, and said, I find I can't go on, but come with me. I've got it all written out, and you can read it if you like. In his chamber, he said, First, I kept a journal. Then, by and by, after years, I took the journal and turned it into a book. How long ago that was! He handed me his manuscript and pointed out the place where I should begin. Begin here. I've already told you what goes before. He was steeped in drowsiness by this time. As I went out at his door, I heard him murmur sleepily, Give you good den, fair sir. I sat down by my fire and examined my treasure. The first part of it, the great bulk of it, was parchment, and yellow with age. I scanned a leaf particularly, and saw that it was a palimpsest. Under the old dim writing of the Yankee historian appeared traces of a penmanship which was older and dimmer still. Latin words and sentences, fragments from old monkish legends, evidently. I turned to the place indicated by my stranger and began to read as follows. The Tale of the Lost Land. Camelot. Chapter 1, Camelot. Camelot. Camelot, said I to myself. I don't seem to remember hearing of it before. Name of the asylum, likely. It was a soft, reposeful summer landscape, as lovely as a dream, and as lonesome as Sunday. The air was full of the smell of flowers, and the buzzing of insects, and the twittering of birds, and there were no people, no wagons, and there was no stir of life. Nothing going on. The road was mainly a winding path with hoofprints in it, and now and then a faint trace of wheels on either side in the grass. Wheels that apparently had a tire as broad as one's hand. Presently, a fair slip of a girl, about 10 years old, with a cataract of golden hair streaming down her shoulders, came along. Around her head she wore a hoop of flame-red poppies. It was as sweet an outfit as ever I saw, what there was of it. She walked indolently along, with a mind at rest, its peace reflected in her innocent face. The circus man paid no attention to her, didn't even seem to see her, and she was no more startled at his fantastic makeup than if she was used to his like every day of her life. She was going by as indifferently as she might have gone by a couple of cows. But then she happened to notice me. Then there was a change. Up went her hands, and she was turned to stone. Her mouth dropped open, her eyes stared wide and timorously. She was the picture of astonished curiosity, touched with fear. And there she stood, gazing, in a sort of stupefied fascination, till we turned a corner of the wood and were lost to her view. That she should be startled at me instead of at the other man was too many for me. I couldn't make head or tail of it. And that she should seem to consider me a spectacle, and totally overlook her own merits in that respect, was another puzzling thing, and a display of magnanimity, too, that was surprising in one so young. There was food for thought there. I moved along as one in a dream. As we approached the town, signs of life began to appear. At intervals, we passed a wretched cabin with a thatched roof, and about it small fields and garden patches in an indifferent state of cultivation. There were people, too, brawny men with long, coarse, uncombed hair that hung down over their faces and made them look like animals. They, and the women, as a rule, wore a coarse toe linen robe, came well below the knee, and a rude sort of sandal, and many bore an iron collar. The small boys and girls were always naked, but nobody seemed to know it. All of these people stared at me, talked about me, ran into the huts and fetched out their families to gape at me. But nobody ever noticed that the other fellow, except to make him humble salutation and get no response for their pains. In the town were some substantial windowless houses of stone, scattered among a wilderness of thatched cabins. The streets were mere crooked alleys, and unpaved. Troops of dogs and nude children played in the sun and made life and noise. Hogs roamed and rooted contentedly about, and one of them lay in a reeking wallow in the middle of the main thoroughfare and suckled her family. Presently, there was a distant blare of military music. It came nearer, still nearer, and soon a noble cavalcade wound into view, glorious with plumed helmets and flashing mail and flaunting banners and rich doublets and horsecloths and gilded spearheads, and through the muck and swine and naked brats and joyous dogs and shabby huts it took its gallant way, and in its wake we followed. Followed through one winding alley and then another, and climbing, always climbing, till at last we gained the breezy height where the huge castle stood. There was an exchange of bugle blasts, then a parley from the walls where men-at-arms in hauberk and morion marched back and forth with halberd at shoulder under flapping banners with the rude figure of a dragon displayed upon them. And then the great gates were flung open, the drawbridge was lowered, and the head of the cavalcade swept forward under the frowning archers. And we, following, soon found ourselves in a great paved court, with towers and turrets stretching up into the blue air on all the four sides. And all about us the dismount was going on, and much greeting and ceremony and running to and fro, and a gay display of moving and intermingling colors, and an altogether pleasant stir and noise and confusion. That's probably the title of the next chapter. See them gathered around the table there. See, it's not quite. It's just round table, or the round table. Chapter 2. King Arthur's Court. At the moment I got a chance, I slipped aside privately and touched an ancient, common-looking man on the shoulder and said in an insinuating, confidential way, "Friend, do me a kindness. Do you belong to the asylum, or are you just on a visit or something like that?" He looked me over stupidly and said, "Marry fair, sir, me seemeth—" "That'll do," I said. "I reckon you're a patient." I moved away, cogitating, and at the same time keeping an eye out for any chance passenger in his right mind that might come along and give me some light. I judged I had found one, presently, so I drew him aside and said in his ear, "If I could see the head keeper a minute, only just a minute." "Prithee, do not let me." "Let you what?" "Hinder me, then, if the word pleased thee better." Then he went on to say he was an undercook and could not stop to gossip, though he would like it for another time, for it would comfort his very liver to know where I got my clothes. As he started away, he pointed and said yonder there was one who was idle enough for my purpose, and was seeking me besides, no doubt. This was an airy slim boy in shrimp-colored tights and dainty laces and ruffles, and he had long yellow curls and wore a plumed pink satin cap tilted complacently over his ear. By his look he was good-natured, by his gait he was satisfied with himself. He was pretty enough to frame. He arrived, looked me over with a smiling and impudent curiosity, said he had come for me, and informed me that he was a page. "Go long," I said. "You ain't more than a paragraph." Okay, hang on. All right. I like Mark Twain. It was pretty severe, but I was nettled. However, it never fazed him. He didn't appear to know he was hurt. He began to talk and laugh, in happy, thoughtless, boyish fashion, as we walked along, and made himself old friends with me at once. Asked me all sorts of questions about myself and about my clothes, but never waited for an answer. Always chattered straight ahead, as if he didn't know he had asked a question and wasn't expecting any reply, until at last he happened to mention that he was born in the beginning of the year 513. It made the cold chills creep over me. I stopped and said, a little faintly, maybe I didn't hear you just right. Say it again and say it slow. What year was it? 513. 513! You don't look it. Come, my boy. I am a stranger and friendless. Be honest and honorable with me. Are you in your right mind? He said he was. Are these other people in their right minds? He said they were. And this isn't an asylum? I mean, it isn't a place where they cure crazy people? He said it wasn't. Well then, I said, either I am a lunatic, or something just as awful has happened. Now, tell me, honest and true, where am I? In King Arthur's court. I waited a minute to let that idea shudder its way home, and then said, and according to your notions, what year is it now? 528, 19th of June. I felt a mournful sinking at the heart, and muttered, I shall never see my friends again. Never, never again. They will not be born for more than 1,300 years yet. I seemed to believe the boy. I didn't know why. Something in me seemed to believe him. My consciousness, as you may say, but my reason didn't. My reason straight away began to clamor. That was natural. I didn't know how to go about satisfying it, because I knew that the testimony of men wouldn't serve. My reason would say they were lunatics, and throw out their evidence. But all of a sudden, I stumbled on the very thing, just by luck. I knew that the only total eclipse of the sun in the first half of the 6th century occurred on the 21st of June, AD 528 OS, and began at 3 minutes after 12 noon. It's a rather strange thing to just have pocketed away in memory. I guess if it's in the 1800s, that sort of trivia is how you prep for Sunday banter. It's a little bit more reasonable than Jeopardy, I guess. I also knew that no total eclipse of the sun was due in what to me was the present year, i.e. 1879, so if I could keep my anxiety and curiosity from eating the heart out of me for 48 hours, I should then find out for certain whether this boy was telling me the truth or not. Wherefore, being a practical Connecticut man, I now shoved this whole problem clear out of my mind till its appointed day and hour should come, in order that I might turn all my attention to the circumstances of the present moment, and be alert and ready to make the most out of them that could be made. One thing at a time is my motto, and just play that thing for all it is worth, even if it's only 2 pair and a jack. I made up my mind to 2 things. If it was still the 19th century and I was among lunatics and I couldn't get away, I would presently boss that asylum or know the reason why. And if, on the other hand, it was really the 6th century, all right, I didn't want any softer thing. I would boss the whole country inside of 3 months, for I judged I would have the start of the best educated man in the kingdom by a matter of 1,300 years and upward. I'm not a man to waste my time after my mind's made up. There's work on hand. So I said to the page, Now, Clarence, my boy, if that might happen to be your name, I'll get you to post me up a little if you don't mind. What is the name of that apparition that brought me here? My master and thine? That is the good knight and great Lord Sir Kay the Seneschal, foster brother to our liege the king. Very good. Go on, tell me everything. He made a long story of it, but the part that had immediate interest for me was this. He said I was Sir Kay's prisoner, and that in the due course of custom I would be flung into a dungeon and left there on scant commons until my friends ransomed me, unless I chanced to rot first. I saw that the last chance had the best show, but I didn't waste any bother about that. Time was too precious. The page said further that dinner was about ended in the great hall by this time, and that as soon as the sociability and the heavy drinking should begin, Sir Kay would have me in and exhibit me before King Arthur and his illustrious knights seated at the Table Round, and would brag about his exploit in capturing me, and would probably exaggerate the facts a little, but it wouldn't be good form for me to correct him, and not over safe either. And when I was done being exhibited, then ho for the dungeon. But he, Clarence, would find a way to come and see me every now and then, and cheer me up, and help me get word to my friends. Get word to my friends! I thanked him. I couldn't do less, and about this time, a lackey came to say I was wanted. So Clarence led me in and took me off to one side and sat down by me. Well, it was a curious kind of spectacle, and interesting. It was an immense place, and rather naked, yes, and full of loud contrasts. It was very, very lofty, so lofty that the banners depending from the arched beams and girders away up there floated in a sort of twilight. There was a stone-railed gallery at each end, high up, with musicians in the one and women clothed in stunning colors in the other. The floor was of big stone flags laid in black and white squares, rather battered by age and use and needing repair. As to ornament, there wasn't any, strictly speaking, though on the walls hung some huge tapestries which were probably taxed as work of art. Battle pieces they were, with horses shaped like those which children cut out of paper or create in gingerbread, with men on them in scale armor whose scales are represented by round holes, so that the men's coat looks as if it had been done with a biscuit punch. There was a fireplace big enough to camp in, and its projecting sides and hood of carved and pillared stonework had the look of a cathedral door. Among the walls stood men-at-arms, in breastplate and morion, with halberds for their only weapon, rigid as statues. And that is what they looked like. In the middle of this groined and vaulted public square was an oaken table, which they called the Table Round. It was as large as a circus ring, and around it sat a great company of men dressed in such various and splendid colors that it hurt one's eyes to look at them. They wore their plumed hats and right along, except that whenever one addressed himself directly to the king, he lifted his hat a trifle, just as he was beginning his remark. Mainly, they were drinking from entire ox horns, but a few were still munching bread or gnawing beef bones. There was about an average of 2 dogs to 1 man, and these sat in expectant attitudes till a spent bone was flung to them, and then they went for it by brigades and divisions with a rush. And there ensued a fight which filled the prospect with a tumultuous chaos of plunging heads and bodies and flashing tails, and the storm of howlings and barkings deafened all speech for the time. But that was no matter, for the dog-fight was always a bigger interest anyway. The men rose, sometimes, to observe it the better and bet on it, and the ladies and the musicians stretched themselves out over their balusters with the same object. And all broke into delighted ejaculations from time to time. In the end, the winning dog stretched himself out comfortably with his bone between his paws and proceeded to growl over it and gnaw it and grease the floor with it, just as 50 others were already doing, and the rest of the court resumed their previous industries and entertainments. As a rule, the speech and behavior of these people were gracious and courtly, and I noticed that they were good and serious listeners when anybody was telling anything. I mean, a dog-fightless interval. And plainly, too, they were a childlike and innocent lot, telling lies of the stateliest pattern with a most gentle and winning naivete, and ready and willing to listen to anybody else's lie, and believe it, too. It was hard to associate them with anything cruel or dreadful, and yet they dealt in tales of blood and suffering with a guileless relish that made me almost forget to shudder. I was not the only prisoner present. There were 20 or more. Poor devils. Many of them were maimed, hacked, carved in a frightful way, and their hair, their faces, their clothing were caked with black and stiffened drenchings of blood. They were suffering sharp physical pain, of course, and weariness, and hunger and thirst, no doubt, and at least none had given them the comfort of a wash, or even the poor charity of a lotion for their wounds. Yet, you never heard them utter a moan or a groan, or saw them show any sign of restlessness, or any disposition to complain. The thought was forced upon me. The rascals! They have served other people so in their day. It being their own turn now, they were not expecting any better treatment than this. So their philosophical bearing is not an outcome of mental training, intellectual fortitude, reasoning. It is mere animal training. They are white Indians. Okay. Here we have Twain's depiction of Merlin here. All right. Chapter 3. Knights of the Table Round. Mainly, the round table talk was monologues, narrative accounts of the adventures in which these prisoners were captured, and their friends and backers killed and stripped of their steeds and armor. As a general thing, as far as I could make out, these murderous adventures were not forays undertaken to avenge injuries, nor to settle old disputes or sudden fallings out. No, as a rule, they were simply duels between strangers. Meet by chance. Duels between strangers. Duels between people who had never even been introduced to each other, and between whom existed no cause of offense whatever. Many a time I had seen a couple of boys, strangers, meet by chance and say simultaneously, "I can lick you," and go at it on the spot. But I had always imagined, until now, that that sort of thing belonged to children only, and was a sign and mark of childhood. And here were these big boobies sticking to it and taking pride in it, clear up into full age and beyond. Yet, there was something very engaging about these great simple-hearted creatures. Something attractive and lovable. There did not seem to be brains enough in the entire nursery, so to speak, to bait a fishhook with. But you didn't seem to mind that, after a little, because you soon saw that brains were not needed in a society like that, and indeed would have marred it, hindered it, spoiled its symmetry, perhaps rendered its existence impossible. There was a fine manliness observable in almost every face, and in some a certain loftiness and sweetness that rebuked your belittling criticisms and stilled them. A most noble benignity and purity reposed in the countenance of him they called Sir Galahad, and likewise in the king's also. And there was majesty and greatness in the giant frame and high bearing of Sir Lancelot of the Lake. There was presently an incident which centered the general interest upon this Sir Lancelot. At a sign from a sort of master of ceremonies, 6 or 8 of the prisoners rose and came forward in a body and knelt on the floor and lifted up their hands toward the ladies' gallery and begged the grace of a word with the Queen. The most conspicuously situated lady in that massed flower-bed of feminine show and finery inclined her head by way of assent. And then the spokesman of the prisoners delivered himself and his fellows into her hands, for free pardon, ransom, captivity, or death, as she, in her good pleasure, might elect. And this, as she said, he was doing by command of Sir Kay, the seneschal, whose prisoners they were, he having vanquished them by his single might and prowess in sturdy conflict in the field. Surprise and astonishment flashed from face to face all over the house. The Queen's gratified smile faded out at the name of Sir Kay. and she looked disappointed. And the page whispered in my ear with an accent and manner expressive of extravagant derision. "Sir Kay, forsooth! Oh, call me pet names, dearest. Call me a marine. In twice 1,000 years shall the unholy invention of man labor at odds to beget the fellow to this majestic lie." Every eye was fastened with severe inquiry upon Sir Kay. But he was equal to the occasion. He got up and played his hand like a major, and took every trick. He said he would state the case exactly according to the facts. He would tell the simple, straightforward tale, without comment of his own. "And then," said he, "if ye find glory and honour due, ye will give it unto him who is the mightiest man of his hands that ever bare shield or strake with sword in the ranks of Christian battle, even him that sitteth there." And he pointed to Sir Lancelot. He fetched them. It was a rattling good stroke. Then he went on, told how Sir Lancelot, seeking adventures, some brief time gone by, killed 7 giants at one sweep of his sword, and set 142 captive maidens free, and then went further still seeking adventures, and found him, Sir Kay, fighting a desperate fight against 9 foreign knights, and straightway took the battle solely into his own hands, and conquered the 9, and that night Sir Lancelot rose quietly, and dressed him in Sir Kay's armour, and took Sir Kay's horse, and gat him away into distant lands, and vanquished 16 knights in one pitched battle, and 34 in another. And all these, and the former 9, he made to swear that about the Whitsuntide they would ride to Arthur's court, and yield them to Queen Guinevere's hands as captives of Sir Kay the Seneschal, spoil of his knightly prowess. And now here were these 6, and the rest would be along as soon as they might be healed of their desperate wounds. Well, it was touching to see the Queen blush and smile, and look embarrassed and happy, and fling furtive glances at Sir Lancelot that would have got him shot in Arkansas, to a dead certainty. Everybody praised the valor and magnanimity of Sir Lancelot. As for me, I was perfectly amazed that one man, all by himself, should have been able to beat down and capture such battalions of practiced fighters. I said as much to Clarence, but this mocking featherhead only said, "And Sir Kay had had time to get another skin of sour wine into him. He had seen the accompt doubled." I looked at the boy in sorrow, and as I looked, I saw the cloud of a deep despondency settle upon his countenance. I followed the direction of his eye, and saw that a very old and white-bearded man, clothed in a flowing black gown, had risen and was standing at the table upon unsteady legs, and feebly swaying his ancient head and surveying the company with his watery and wandering eye. The same suffering look that was in the page's face was observable in all the faces around, the look of dumb creatures who know that they must endure and make no moan. "Marry, we shall have it again," sighed the boy. "That same old weary tale that he hath told 1,000 times in the same words, and that he will tell till he dieth. Every time he hath gotten his barrel full, and feeleth his exaggeration mill a-working. Would God I had died, or I saw this day." "Who is it?" "Merlin, the mighty liar and magician. Perdition singe him for the wariness he worketh with his one tale. But that men fear him, for that he hath the storms and the lightnings and all the devils that be in hell at his beck and call, and they would have dug his entrails out these many years ago to get at that tale and squelch it. He telleth it always in the third person, making believe he is too modest to glorify himself. Maledictions light upon him, misfortune be his dole. Good friend, prithee, call me for evensong." All right, we've got an ad about to start up, so let's go ahead and we're gonna set a highlighter here. No, I need instant highlight on, and boop. All right, this will be where we pick back up. But so far, this is fun. I'm I think I'm enjoying this a lot more for having already read Le Morte d'Arthur. We recognize the characters, and we can see already the exaggerations to the characters that Mark Twain is making, and the sort of modernization of perceptions. The view of Kay from a modern eye, the view of all of the knights as rowdy children. So, this is going to be good, especially as we get to see more and more of the characters that we're familiar with. So, let's go ahead and take a short break, top up your drinks, stretch your legs, and we'll be back to continue A Yankee in King Arthur's Court in just a few minutes. Thanks. All right, we are back. So yeah, let's go ahead and get through the rest of this chapter, and then we're going to keep reading tonight, but it's been a little bit in. We can start to unpack things and review. So let's jump back in, and we'll get through the last few pages of this one. The boy nestled himself upon my shoulder and pretended to go to sleep. The old man began his tale, and presently the lad was asleep in reality. So also were the dogs, and the court, the lackeys, and the files of men-at-arms. The droning voice droned on. A soft snoring arose on all sides and supported like a deep and subdued accompaniment of wind instruments. Some heads were bowed upon folded arms, some lay back with open mouths that issued unconscious music. The flies buzzed and bit unmolested. The rats swarmed softly out from 100 holes and pattered about and made themselves at home everywhere. And one of them sat up like a squirrel on the king's head and held a bit of cheese in its hands and nibbled it, and dribbled the crumbs in the king's face with naive and impudent irreverence. It was a tranquil scene, and restful to the wary eye and jaded spirit. This was the old man's tale. He said, "Right, so the king and Merlin departed, and went until in Irma there was a good man and a great leech. So the hermit searched all his wounds and gave him good salves. So the king was there 3 days, and then were his wounds well amended, that he might ride and go, and so departed. And as they rode, Arthur said, I have no sword, no force." Footnote from Mark Twain, no matter. "No force," said Merlin. "Hereby is a sword that shall be yours, and I may." So they rode till they came to a lake, the which was of fair water and broad. And in the midst of the lake Arthur was ware of an arm clothed in white samite, that held a fair sword in that hand. "Lo," said Merlin, "yonder is that sword that I spake of." With that they saw a damsel going upon the lake. "What damsel is that?" said Arthur. "That is the lady of the lake," said Merlin, "and within that lake is a rock, and therein is as fair a place as any on earth, and richly beseen. And this damsel will come to you anon, and then speak ye fair to her that she will give you that sword." Anon withal came the damsel unto Arthur, and saluted him, and he her again. "Damsel," said Arthur, "what sword is that yonder the arm holdeth above the water? I would it were mine, for I have no sword." "Sir Arthur King," said the damsel, "that sword is mine, and if ye will give me a gift when I ask it you, ye shall have it." "By my faith," said Arthur, "I will give you what gift ye will ask." "Well," said the damsel, "go ye into yonder barge, and row yourself to the sword, and take it and the scabbard with you, and I will ask my gift when I see my time." So Sir Arthur and Merlin alight, and tied their horses to 2 trees, and so they went into the ship. And when they came to the sword that the hand held, Sir Arthur took it up by the handles and took it with him. And the arm and the hand went under the water, and so they came unto the land and rode forth. And then Sir Arthur saw a rich pavilion, which signifieth yonder pavilion. "It is the knight's pavilion," said Merlin, "that ye fought with last, Sir Pellinore. But he is out, he is not there. He hath ado with a knight of yours that hight Eglaim. And they have fought together, but at the last Eglaim fled, and else he had been dead, and he hath chased him even to Carleon. And we shall meet with him anon in the highway." "That is well said," said Arthur. "Now I have a sword. Now will I wage battle with him, and be avenged upon him." "Sir, ye shall not so," said Merlin, "for the knight is weary of fighting and chasing, so that ye shall have no worship to have ado with him. Also, he will not lightly be matched of one night living, and therefore it is my counsel, let him pass. Let him pass, for he shall do you good service in short time, and his sons, after his days. Also, ye shall see that day in short space ye shall be right glad to give him your sister to wed. When I see him, I will do as ye advise me, said Arthur. Then Sir Arthur looked on the sword, and liked it passing well. Whether liketh you better, said Merlin, the sword or the scabbard? Me liketh the sword, said Arthur. Ye are more unwise, said Merlin, for the scabbard is worth 10 of the sword. For while ye have the scabbard upon you, ye shall never lose no blood. Be ye never so sore wounded, therefore keep well the scabbard always with you. So they rode into Carlion, and by the way they met with Sir Pellinore. But Merlin had done such a craft that Pellinore saw not Arthur, and he passed by without any words. I marvel, said Arthur, that the knight would not speak. Sir, said Merlin, he saw you not, for and he had seen you, ye had not lightly departed. So they came unto Carlion, whereof his knights were passing glad. And when they heard of his adventures, they marvelled that he would jeopard his person so alone. But all men of worship said it was merry to be under such a chieftain that would put his person in adventure as other poor knights did. The horrible towering monster is the art there. Alright, so that brings us to the end of chapter 3. I am really enjoying Mark Twain's depiction of Merlin in this, as just a doddering old man who everyone is just putting up with constantly. They just do not give a damn about him. And he brings out the same story every time he talks, and he's not really giving it his all, and no one really likes him, but he's just there. It's definitely some foreshadowing going on. There's going to be some problems with Merlin here. You just know it. Because he's one of those. And our Yankee is rather headstrong of himself. Yeah, a little ahead of the curve. But yeah, so far this has been an interesting twist on the perception of the royal court, the round table and everything going on. Instead of looking at the knights as like gallant warriors and the like chivalric ideal, they're a bunch of children who never grew up. And that is so real. So real. It's the same thing you see with people wandering around the streets picking fights. They're just boys that never grew up. A little bit. Their fists grew a little bit faster than their heads. Yeah, there are those of all times. It just was, instead of being looked down upon and estranged like they are now, mostly, they are held up in this situation. And yeah, it's very accurate to how reading Lamort feels. When we were reading it, it was very hard to separate the modern sensibilities from just how silly it seemed some of these adventures they were getting up to was. So, Twain's not pulling his punches. He's just saying, you know what? No. We're gonna lay this out. And you know what? Bless him for it. Mark Twain, ever the honest man. Alright, let's continue with chapter 4. Sir Dinadan the Humorist. It seemed to me that this quaint lie was most simply and beautifully told. But then I had heard it only once, and that makes a difference. It was pleasant to the others when it was fresh, no doubt, Sir Dinadan the humorist was the first to awake, and he soon roused the rest with a practical joke of a sufficiently poor quality. He tied some metal mugs to a dog's tail and turned him loose. He tore around and around the place in a frenzy of fright, with all the other dogs bellowing after him and battering and crashing against everything that came in their way and making altogether a chaos of confusion and a most deafening din and turmoil, at which every man and woman of the multitude laughed till the tears flowed, and some fell out of their chairs and wallowed on the floor in ecstasy. It was just like so many children. Sir Dinadan was so proud of his exploit that he could not keep from telling over and over again to Wariness how the immortal idea happened to occur to him, and as is the way with humorists of his breed, he was still laughing at it after everybody else had got through. Poor dog. So he was so set up that he concluded to make a speech. Of course, a humorous speech. I think I never heard so many old, played-out jokes strung together in my life. He was worse than the minstrels, worse than the clown in the circus. It seemed peculiarly sad to sit here, 1,300 years before I was born, and listen again to poor, flat, worm-eaten jokes that had given me the dry gripes when I was a boy 1,300 years afterwards. It about convinced me that there isn't any such thing as a new joke possible. Everybody laughed at these antiquities, but then they always do. I had noticed that centuries later. However, of course, the scoffer didn't laugh. I mean, the boy. No, he scoffed. There wasn't anything at all he wouldn't scoff at. He said the most of Sir Dinadan's jokes were rotten, and the rest were petrified. I said petrified was good, as I believed myself that the only right way to classify the majestic ages of some of those jokes was by geologic periods. But that neat idea hit the boy in a blank place, for geology hadn't been invented yet. However, I made a note of the remark, and calculated to educate the Commonwealth up to it if I pulled through. It is no use to throw a good thing away merely because the market isn't ripe yet. Now, Sir Kay arose and began to fire up on his history mill with me for fuel. It was time for me to feel serious, and I did. Sir Kay told how he had encountered me in a far land of barbarians, who all wore the same ridiculous garb that I did, a garb that was the work of enchantment and intended to make the wearer secure from hurt by human hands. However, he had nullified the force of the enchantment by prayer, and had killed my 13 knights in a 3 hours battle, and taken me prisoner, sparing my life, in order that so strange a curiosity as I was, might be exhibited to the wonder and admiration of the king and the court. He spoke of me all the time in the blandest way, as this prodigious giant, and this horrible sky-towering monster, and this tusked and taloned man-devouring ogre. And everybody took in all this bosh in the naivest way, and never smiled or seemed to notice that there was any discrepancy between these watered statistics and me. He said that in trying to escape from him, I sprang into the top of a tree 200 cubits high at a single bound, but he dislodged me with a stone the size of a cow, which all to brast the most of my bones, and then swore me to appear at King Arthur's court for sentence. He ended by condemning me to die at noon on the 21st, and was so little concerned about it that he stopped to yawn before he named the date. I was in a dismal state by this time, indeed. I was hardly enough in my right mind to keep the run of a dispute that sprung up as to how I had better be killed, the possibility of the killing being doubted by some, because of the enchantment in my clothes, and yet it was nothing but an ordinary suit of $15 slop shops. Still, I was sane enough to notice this detail, to wit, many of the terms used in the most matter-of-fact way by this great assemblage of the first ladies and gentlemen in this land would have made a Comanche blush. Indelicacy is too mild a term to convey the idea. However, I had read Tom Jones and Roderick Random and other books of that kind, and knew that the highest and first ladies and gentlemen in England had remained little or no cleaner in their talk and in the morals and conduct which such talk implies, clear up to 100 years ago. In fact, clear into our own 19th century. In which century, broadly speaking, the earliest samples of the real lady and real gentleman discoverable in English history, or in European history for that matter, may be said to have made their appearance. I suppose Sir Walter, instead of putting the conversations into the mouths of his characters, had allowed the characters to speak for themselves. We should have had talk from Rebecca and Ivanhoe and the soft Lady Rowena, which would embarrass a tramp in our day. However, to the unconsciously indelicate, all things are delicate. King Arthur's people were not aware that they were indecent, and I had presence of mind enough not to mention it. Oh, hey, Neff, welcome. They were so troubled about my enchanted clothes that they were mightily relieved. At last, when old Merlin swept the difficulty away for them with a common-sense hint, he asked them why they were so dull. Why didn't it occur to them to strip me? In half a minute, I was as naked as a pair of tongs, and dear, to think of it, I was the only embarrassed person there. Everybody discussed me, and did it as unconcernedly as if I had been a cabbage. Queen Guinevere was as naively interested as the rest, and said she had never seen anybody with legs just like mine before. It was the only compliment I got, if it was a compliment. Finally, I was carried off in one direction and my perilous clothes in another. I was shoved into a dark and narrow cell in a dungeon with some scant remnants for dinner, some mouldy straw for a bed, and no end of rats for company. Well, okay, so Merlin, at least, he may not be a great storyteller, but he at least has a little bit of sense, where if the clothes are the problem, separate the man from the clothes. So be it. It's just made common sense, doesn't it? Yeah, that's a bot that needs to get going. All right, continuing on with chapter 5 tonight. An inspiration. I was so tired that even my fears were not able to keep me awake long. When I next came to myself, I seemed to have been asleep a very long time. My first thought was, well, what an astonishing dream I've had. I reckon I've waked only just in time to keep from being hanged or drowned or burned or something. I'll nap again until the whistle blows, and then I'll go down to the arms factory and have it out with Hercules. But just then I heard the harsh music of rusty chains and bolts. A light flashed in my eyes, and that butterfly Clarence stood before me. I gasped with surprise. My breath almost got away from me. "What?" I said. "You here yet? Get along with the rest of the dream. Scatter!" But he only laughed in his light-hearted way and fell to making fun of my sorry plight. All right, I said resignedly. Let the dreams go on. I'm in no hurry. "Prithee, what dream?" "What dream? Why, the dream that I'm in Arthur's court, a person who never existed, and that I'm talking to you, who are nothing but a work of the imagination." "Oh, law, indeed! And is it a dream that you're to be burned tomorrow? Answer me that!" The shock that went through me was distressing. I now began to reason that my situation was in the last degree serious, dream or no dream. For I knew by past experience of the lifelike intensity of dreams that to be burned to death, even in a dream, would be very far from being a jest, and was a thing to be avoided by any means, fair or foul, that I could contrive. So I said beseechingly, "Ah, Clarence, good boy, only friend I've got, for you are my friend, aren't you? Don't fail me. Help me to devise some way of escaping from this place." "Now, do but hear thyself. Escape? Why, man, the corridors are on guard, and keep of men-at-arms." No doubt. But how many, Clarence? Not many, I hope." "Full a score. One may not hope to escape." After a pause, hesitatingly, "And there be other reasons, and weightier." "Other ones? What are they?" "Well, they say, but I daren't. Indeed, daren't." "Why, poor lad, What is the matter? Why do you blanch? Why do you tremble so? Oh, in sooth, there is need. I do want to tell you, but... Oh, come, be brave, be a man! Speak out! There's a good lad. He hesitated, pulled one way by desire, the other way by fear, then he stole to the door and peeped out, listening. And finally, crept close to me and put his mouth to my ear and told me his fearful news in a whisper. And with all the cowering apprehension of one who was venturing upon an awful ground and speaking of things whose very mention might be frighted with death. Merlin, in his malice, has woven a spell about this dungeon. And there bides not the man in these kingdoms that would be desperate enough to essay to cross its lines with you. Now, God pity me, I have told it. Be kind to me, be merciful to a poor boy who means thee well, for an thou betray me, I am lost. I laughed, the only really refreshing laugh I had had for some time, and shouted, Merlin has wrought a spell. Merlin, forsooth. That cheap old humbug, that maundering old ass. Bosh, pure bosh, the silliest bosh in the world. Why, it does seem to me that of all the childish, idiotic, chuckle-headed, chicken-livered superstitions that... Oh, damn Merlin! But Clarence had slumped to his knees before I had half finished, and he was like to go out of his mind with fright. Oh, beware! These are awful words. Any moment these walls may crumble upon us if you say such things. Oh, call them back before it is too late! Now, this strange exhibition gave me a good idea, and set me to thinking. If everybody about here was so honestly and sincerely afraid of Merlin's pretended magic, as Clarence was, certainly a superior man like me ought to be shrewd enough to contrive some way to take advantage of such a state of things. I went on thinking and worked out a plan. Then I said, Get up, pull yourself together, look me in the eye. Do you know why I laughed? No, but for our blessed lady's sake, do it no more. Well, I'll tell you why I laughed. Because I'm a magician myself. Thou? The boy recoiled a step and caught his breath, for the thing hit him rather sudden, but the aspect which he took on was very, very respectful. I took quick note of that. It indicated that a humbug didn't need to have a reputation in this asylum. People stood ready to take him at his word. Without that, I resumed. I've known Merlin 700 years, and he... Don't interrupt me. He has died and come alive again 13 times and traveled under a new name every time. Smith, Jones, Robinson, Jackson, Peters, Haskins, Merlin, a new alias every time he turns up. I knew him in Egypt 300 years ago. I knew him in India 500 years ago. He is always blethering around in my way everywhere I go. It makes me tired. He doesn't amount to shucks as a magician, knows some of the old common tricks, but has never got beyond the rudiments and never will. He is well enough for the provinces, one-night stands and that sort of thing, you know, but dear me, he oughtn't to be set up for an expert. Anyway, not where there's a real artist. Now, look here, Clarence. I am going to stand your friend right along, and in return, you must be mine. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to get word to the king that I am a magician myself, and the supreme, grand, high, yuck-muck-a-muck, and head of the tribe at that. And I want him to be made to understand that I am just quietly arranging a little calamity here that will make the fur fly in these realms if Sir Kay's project is carried out, and any harm comes to me. Will you get that to the king, for me? The poor boy was in such a state that he could hardly answer me. It was pitiful to see a creature so terrified, so unnerved, so demoralized. But he promised everything. And on my side, he made me promise over and over again that I would remain his friend, and never turn against him or cast any enchantments upon him. And then he worked his way out, staying himself with his hand along the wall, like a sick person. Presently, this thought occurred to me. How heedless I have been. When the boy gets calm, he will wonder why a great magician like me should have begged a boy like him to help me get out of this place. He will put this and that together, and will see that I am a humbug. I worried over that heedless blunder for an hour, and called myself a great many hard names meantime. But finally, it occurred to me all of a sudden that these animals don't reason. That they never put this and that together. That all their talk showed that they didn't know a discrepancy when they saw it. I was at rest then. But as soon as one is at rest in this world, off he goes on something else to worry about. It occurred to me that I had made another blunder. I had sent the boy off to alarm his betters with a threat. I, intending to invent a calamity at my leisure. Now the people who are the readiest and eagerest and willingest to swallow miracles are the very ones who are hungriest to see you perform them. Suppose I should be called on for a sample. Suppose I should be asked to name my calamity. Yes, I had made a blunder. I ought to have invented my calamity first. What shall I do? What can I say to gain a little time? I was in trouble again, in the deepest kind of trouble. There's a footstep. They're coming. If I had only just a moment to think. Good, I've got it. I'm all right. You see, it was the eclipse. It came into my mind in the nick of time how Columbus or Cortez or one of those people played an eclipse as a saving trump once on some savages. I saw my chance. I could play it myself now, and it wouldn't be any plagiarism either, because I should get it in nearly 1,000 years ahead of those parties. Clarence came in, subdued, distressed, and said, I hastened the message to our liege the king, and straightway he had me to his presence. He was frightened even to the marrow. He was minded to give order for your instant enlargement, and that you be clothed in fine raiment, and lodged as befitted one so great. But then came Merlin, and spoiled all, for he persuaded the king that you are mad, and know not whereof you speak, and said your threat is but foolishness and idle vapouring. They disputed long, but in the end Merlin, scoffing, said, Wherefore hath he not named his brave calamity? Verily it is because he cannot. And this thrust did in a most sudden sort close the king's mouth, and he could offer naught to turn the argument, and so reluctant and full loth to do you the discourtesy, yet he prayeth you to consider his perplexed case, as noting how the matter stands, and name the calamity. If so be you have determined the nature of it, and the time of its coming, prithee delay not. To delay it at such a time were to double and treble the perils that already compass thee about. Be thou wise, name the calamity. I allowed silence to accumulate while I got my impressiveness together, and said, How long have I been shut up in this hole? You were shut up when yesterday was well spent. It is 9 of the morning now. No, then I have slept well, sure enough. 9 in the morning now? And yet it is the very complexion of midnight, to a shade. This is the 20th, then? The 20th, yes. And I am to be burned alive tomorrow? The boy shuddered. At what hour? At high noon. Now then, I will tell you what to say. I paused, and stood over that cowering lad a whole minute in awful silence. Then, in a voice deep, measured, charged with doom, I began and rose by dramatically graded stages to my colossal climax, which I delivered in as sublime and noble a way as ever I did such a thing in my life. Go back and tell the king that at that hour I will smother the whole world in the dead blackness of midnight. I will blot out the sun, and he shall never shine again. The fruits of the earth shall rot for the lack of light and warmth, and the peoples of the earth shall famish and die to the last man. I had to carry the boy on myself. He sunk into such a collapse. I handed him over to the soldiers and went back. It's nice to see that our narrator has a flair for the dramatic here. I think it doubled up the image there. Yes, it did. All right, so chapter 6. We'll see the play of the eclipse coming out. But for sure, if you're gonna pretend to be a big-headed asshole, wizard, you gotta play the part. In the stillness and the darkness, realization soon began to supplement knowledge. The mere knowledge of a fact is pale, but when you come to realize your fact, it takes on color. It is all the difference between hearing of a man being stabbed to the heart and seeing it done. In the stillness and the darkness, the knowledge that I was in deadly danger took to itself deeper and deeper meaning all the time. A something which was realization crept inch by inch through my veins and turned me cold. But it is a blessed provision of nature that at times like these, as soon as a man's mercury has got down to a certain point, there comes a revulsion. And he rallies. Hope springs up, and cheerfulness along with it. And then he is in good shape to do something for himself, if anything can be done. When my rally came, it came with a bound. I said to myself that my eclipse would be sure to save me, and make me the greatest man in the kingdom besides. And straightway my mercury went up to the top of the tube, and my solicitudes all vanished. I was as happy a man as there was in the world. I was even impatient for tomorrow to come. I so wanted to gather in that great triumph and be the center of all the nation's wonder and reverence. Besides, in a business way, it would be the making of me. I knew that. Meantime, there was one thing which had got pushed into the background of my mind. That was the half-conviction that when the nature of my proposed calamity should be reported to these superstitious people, it would have such an effect that they would want to compromise. So, by and by, when I heard footsteps coming, that thought was recalled to me. And I said to myself, as sure as anything, it's the compromise. Well, if it is good, all right, I will accept. But if it isn't, I mean to stand my ground and play my hand for all it is worth. The door opened, and some men-at-arms appeared. The leader said, "The steak is ready! Come!" The steak! The strength went out of me, and I almost fell down. It is hard to get one's breath at such time. Such lumps come into one's throat and such gaspings, but as soon as I could speak, I said, "But this is a mistake. The execution is tomorrow. Order changed. Been set forward a day. Haste thee!" I was lost. There was no help for me. I was dazed, stupefied. I had no command over myself. I only wandered purposely about, like one out of his mind. So the soldiers took hold of me and pulled me along with them, out of the cell and along the maze of underground corridors, and finally into the fierce glare of daylight in the upper world. As we stepped into the vast enclosed court of the castle, I got a shock, for the first thing I saw was the stake, standing in the center, and near it, the piled faggots and a monk. And on all four sides of the court, the seated multitudes rose rank above rank, forming sloping terraces that were rich with color. The king and the queen sat in their thrones, the most conspicuous figures there, of course. To note all this occupied but a second. The next second, Clarence had slipped from some place of concealment and was pouring news into my ear, his eyes beaming with triumph and gladness. He said, "'Tis through me the change was wrought, and main hard have I worked to do it too. But when I revealed to them the calamity in store, and saw how mighty was the terror it did engender, then saw I also that this was the time to strike. Wherefore I diligently pretended unto this and that and the other one, that your power against the sun could not reach its full until the morrow. And so, if any would save the sun and the world, you must be slain today, while your enchantments are but in the weaving and lack potency. Odds bodikins, it was but a dull lie, a most indifferent invention, but you should have seen them seize it and swallow it, in the frenzy of their fright, as it were salvation sent from heaven. And all the while was I laughing in my sleeve the one moment to see them so cheaply deceived, and glorifying God the next, that he was content to let the meanest of his creatures be his instrument to the saving of thy life. Ah, how happy has the matter sped! You will not need to do the sun a real hurt. Oh, forget not that. On your soul, forget it not. Only make a little darkness. Only the littlest little darkness, mind, and cease with that. It will be sufficient. They will see that I spoke falsely, being ignorant, as they will fancy. And with the falling of the first shadow of the darkness, you shall see them go mad with fear. And they will set you free and make you great. Go to thy triumph now. But remember, good friend, I implore thee to remember my supplication, and to the blessed Son no hurt, for my sake, thy true friend. I choked out some words through my grief and misery, as much as to say I would spare the sun, for which the lad's eyes paid me back with such deep and loving gratitude that I had not the heart to tell him his good-hearted foolishness had ruined me and sent me to my death. As the soldiers assisted me across the court, the stillness was so profound that if I had been blindfolded, I should have supposed I was in a solitude instead of walled in by 4,000 people. There was not a movement perceptible in those masses of humanity. They were as rigid as stone images, and as pale, and dread sat upon every countenance. This hush continued while I was being chained to the stake. It still continued while the faggots were carefully and tediously piled about my ankles, my knees, my thighs, my body. Then there was a pause, and a deeper hush, if possible, and a man knelt down at my feet with a blazing torch. The multitude strained forward, gazing and parting slightly from their seats without knowing it. The monk raised his hands above my head, and his eyes toward the blue sky, and began some words in Latin. In this attitude he droned on and on a little while, and then stopped. I waited 2 or 3 moments, then looked up. He was standing there petrified. With a common impulse, the multitude rose slowly up and stared into the sky. I followed their eyes as sure as guns. There was my eclipse beginning. The life went boiling through my veins. I was a new man. The rim of black spread slowly into the sun's disk. My heart beat higher and higher, and still the assemblage and the priest stared into the sky motionless. I knew that this gaze would be turned upon me next. When it was, I was ready. I was in one of the most grand attitudes I ever struck, with my arms stretched up, pointing to the sun. It was a noble effect. You could see the shudder sweep the mast like a wave. 2 shouts rang out, one close upon the heels of the other. "Apply the torch! I forbid it!" The one was from Merlin, the other from the king. Merlin started from his place to apply the torch himself, I judged. I said, "Stay where you are. If any man moves, even the king, before I give him leave, I will blast him with thunder. I will consume him with lightnings." The multitude sank meekly into their seats, and I was just expecting they would. Merlin hesitated a moment or two, and I was on pins and needles during that little while. Then he sat down, and I took a good breath, for I knew I was master of the situation now. The king said, "Be merciful, sir, fair sir, and essay no further in this perilous matter, lest disaster follow. It was reported to us that your powers could not attain their full strength until the morrow, but—" "Your Majesty thinks the report may have been a lie?" "It was a lie." That made an immense effect. Up went appealing hands everywhere, and the king was assailed with a storm of supplications that I might be bought off at any price. And the calamity stayed. The king was eager to comply. He said, "Name any terms, reverend sir, even to the halving of my kingdom, but banish this calamity. Spare the sun." My fortune was made. I would have taken him up in a minute, but I could stop an eclipse. The thing was out of the question. So I asked time to consider. The king said, How long, good sir? Be merciful, look, it groweth darker, moment by moment, prithee, how long?" Oh, not long. Half an hour, maybe an hour. There were 1,000 pathetic protests, but I couldn't shorten up any, for I couldn't remember how long a total eclipse lasts. I was in a puzzled condition, anyway, and wanted to think. Something was wrong about that eclipse, and the fact was very unsettling. If this wasn't the one I was after, how was I to tell whether this was the 6th century or nothing but a dream? Dear me. If I could only prove it was the latter. Here was a glad new hope. If the boy was right about the date, and this was surely the 20th, it wasn't the 6th century. I reached for the monk's sleeve, in considerable excitement, and asked him what day of the month it was. Hang him! He said it was the 21st! It made me turn cold to hear him. I begged him not to make any mistake about it, but he was sure. He knew it was the 21st. So that feather-headed boy had botched things again. The time of the day was right for the eclipse. I had seen that for myself in the beginning. But the dial that was nearby... Oh, yes, I was in King Arthur's court. I might as well make the most out of it if I could. The darkness was steadily growing, the people becoming more and more distressed. I now said, I have reflected, Sir King. For a lesson, I will let this darkness proceed and spread night in the world. But whether I blot out the sun for good or restore it, shall rest with you. These are the terms, to wit. You shall remain king over all your dominions, and receive all the glories and honors that belong to the kingship. But you shall appoint me your perpetual minister and executive, and give me for my services 1% of such actual increase of revenue over and above its present amount as I may succeed in creating for the state. If I can't live on that, I shan't ask anybody to give me a lift. Is it satisfactory? There was a prodigious roar of applause, and out of the midst of it the king's voice rose, saying, Away with his bonds, and set him free, and do him homage, high and low, rich and poor, for he is become the king's right hand, is clothed with power and authority, and his seat is upon the highest step of the throne. Now sweep away this creeping night, and bring the light and cheer again, that all the world may bless thee. But I said that a common man should be ashamed before the world is nothing, but it were dishonor to the king if any that saw his minister naked should not also see him delivered from his shame. If I might ask that my clothes be brought again... They are not meet, the king broke in. Fetch raiment of another sort, clothe him like a prince. My idea worked. I wanted to keep things as they were till the eclipse was total. Otherwise they would be trying again to get me to dismiss the darkness, and, of course, I couldn't do it. Sending for the clothes gained some delay, but not enough. So I had to make another excuse. I said it would be but natural if the king should change his mind and repent to some extent of what he had done under excitement. Therefore I would let the darkness grow a while, and if at the end of a reasonable time the king had kept his mind the same, the darkness should be dismissed. Neither the king nor anybody else was satisfied with that arrangement, but I had to stick to my point. It grew darker and darker, and blacker, while I struggled with those awkward 6th century clothes. It got to be pitch black at last, and the multitude groaned with horror to feel the cold, uncanny night breezes fan through the place and see the stars come out and twinkle in the sky. At last, the eclipse was total, and I was very glad of it, but everybody else was in misery. Which was quite natural. I said, The king, by his silence, still stands to the terms. Then I lifted up my hands, stood just so a moment. Then I said, with the most awful solemnity, Let the enchantment dissolve and pass harmlessly away. There was No response. For a moment, in that deep darkness and the graveyard hush. But when the silver rim of the sun pushed itself out a moment or two later, the assemblage broke loose with a vast shout and came pouring down like a deluge to smother me with blessings and gratitude. And Clarence was not the last of the wash, to be sure. One of the people. So I was lucky enough to be in the course of the last, or I don't know if it was the last, but a recent total solar eclipse not too long ago. It was just a couple of years ago now, I think. A year and a half, 2 years. I lose track. Time is hard. But you know what? If we weren't expecting it, it would be super freaky. Because it gets really dark when you're in a totality, when you're under the totality. And it does get cold. And you do see some of the stars coming out. It's actually pretty crazy. Like, even for a modern person, it's like, man, this is weird. So, a little bit of maintain the suspension of disbelief here, because shit's cracked. All right, let's see. We've got about 10-15 minutes yet. Let's go ahead and try and get through one more chapter tonight. We're making good progress, and I'm enjoying this book quite a lot, honestly. It's not really pretentious or silly or anything. It's just, it's more silly than pretentious. Oh, is our bitrate dropping on Twitch? It looks okay. For some reason, it's yelling at me about bitrate, though. We should be fine. Not dropping frames. We look good on... I think we're fine. I think it's just complaining for the sake of complaining. It do be that way. Alright, anyway, let's try and get through one more chapter tonight, and we'll see what starts to develop now that he's been spared the headsman's block, or the pyre, I should say. Alright. Chapter 7. Merlin's Tower. Inasmuch as I was now the second personage in the kingdom, as far as political power and authority were concerned, much was made of me. My raiment was of silks and velvets and cloth of gold, and by consequence was very showy. Also uncomfortable. But habit would soon reconcile me to my clothes. I was aware of that. I was given the choicest suite of apartments in the castle, after the king's. They were aglow with loud-colored silken hangings, but the stone floors had nothing but rushes on them for a carpet, and they were misfit rushes at that, being not all of one breed. Oh, the scandal. As for conveniences, properly speaking, there weren't any. I mean, little conveniences. It is the little conveniences that make the real comfort of life. The big oaken chairs, graced with rude carvings, were well enough, but that was the stopping place. There was no soap, no matches, no looking-glass except a metal one, about as powerful as a pail of water. And not a chromo. I had been used to chromos for years, and I saw now that, without my suspecting it, a passion for art had got worked into the fabric of my being. It was become a part of me. It made me homesick to look around over this proud and gaudy but heartless barrenness and remember that in our house in East Hartford, all unpretending as it was, you couldn't go into a room but you would find an insurance chromo, or at least a three-color God Bless Our Home over the door. And in the parlor, we had 9. But here, even in my grand room of state, there wasn't anything in the nature of a picture, except the thing the size of a bed quilt, which was either woven or knitted. It had darned places in it, and nothing in it was the right color or the right shape, and as for proportions, even Raphael himself couldn't have botched them more formidably. After all his practice on those nightmares they called his they call his celebrated Hampton Court cartoons. Raphael was a bird. We had several of his chromos. One was his miraculous draft of fishes, where he puts in a miracle of his own, puts 3 men into a canoe which wouldn't have held a dog without upsetting. I always admired to study art. It was so fresh and unconventional. There wasn't even a bell or a speaking tube in the castle. I had a great many servants, and those that were on duty lolled in the anteroom. And when I wanted one of them, I had to go and call for him. There was no gas, there was no candles. A bronze dish half full of boarding-house butter with a blazing rag floating in it was the thing that produced what was regarded as light. A lot of these hung along the walls and modified the dark. Just toned it down enough to make it dismal. If you went out at night, your servants carried torches. There were no books, pens, paper, or ink, and no glass in the openings they believed to be windows. It's a little thing, glass is, until it is absent. Then it becomes a big thing. But perhaps the worst of all was that there wasn't any sugar, coffee, tea, or tobacco. I saw that I was just another Robinson Crusoe cast away on an uninhabited island, with no society but some more or less tame animals. And if I wanted to make life bearable, I must do as he did. Invent, contrive, create, reorganize things, set brain and hand to work, and keep them busy. Well, that was in my line. That reminds me, we haven't read any Robinson Crusoe, have we? I guess that also goes on the short list. I guess when we read The Mysterious Island, that was close enough to Robinson Crusoe. Let's be real. One thing troubled me along at first. The immense interest which people took in me. Apparently the whole nation wanted to look at me. It soon transpired that the eclipse had scared the British world almost to death. That while it lasted, the whole country, from one end to the other, was in a pitiable state of panic. And the churches, hermitages, and monkeries overflowed with praying and weeping poor creatures who thought the end of the world had come. Then had followed the news that the producer of this awful event was a stranger, a mighty magician at Arthur's court, that he could have blown out the sun like a candle, and was just going to do it when his mercy was purchased. And he then dissolved his enchantments and was now recognized and honored as the man who had, by his unaided might, saved the globe from destruction and its peoples from extinction. Now, if you consider that everybody believed that, and not only believed it, but never even dreamed of doubting it, you will easily understand that there was not a person in all Britain that would not have walked 50 miles to get a sight of me. Of course, it was all the talk. All other subjects were dropped. Even the king became suddenly a person of minor interest and notoriety. Within 24 hours, the delegations began to arrive, and from that time onward, for a fortnight, they kept coming. The village was crowded, and all the countryside. I had to go out 12 times a day and show myself to these reverent and awe-stricken multitudes. It came to be a great burden as to time and trouble, but of course it was at the same time compensatingly agreeable to be so celebrated at such a center of homage. It turned Brer Merlin green with envy and spite, which was a great satisfaction to me. But there was one thing I couldn't understand. Nobody had asked for an autograph. I spoke to Clarence about it. By George, I had to explain to him what it was. Then he said nobody in the country could read or write but 12 priests. Land, think of that. There was another thing that troubled me a little. Those multitudes presently began to agitate for another miracle. That was natural. to be able to carry back to their far homes the boast that they had seen the man who could command the sun riding in the heavens and be obeyed. It would make them great in the eyes of their neighbors, and envied by them all. But to be able to do so, to also say that they had seen him work a miracle themselves, why, people would come a distance to see them. The pressure got to be pretty strong. There was going to be an eclipse of the moon, and I knew the date and hour, but it was too far away, 2 years. I would have given a good deal for license to hurry it up and use it now when there was a big market for it. It seemed a great pity to have wasted so, and come lagging along at a time when a body wouldn't have any use for it, as like as not. If it had been booked for only a month away, I could have sold it short, but as matters stood, I couldn't seem to cipher out any way to make it do me any good. So I gave up trying. Next, Clarence found that old Merlin was making himself busy on the sly among these people. He was spreading a report that I was a humbug, and that the reason I didn't accommodate the people with a miracle was because I couldn't. I thought I must do something. I presently thought out a plan. All right, we've got an ad kicking off here in a bit, so let's take a short break, stand up, stretch our legs. When we come back, we'll finish this chapter, take a few minutes to chat, and then we'll wrap up for the evening. But let's let this ad run its course, and then we'll be back as soon as I run the highlighter. There we go. All right, be right back, guys. Thanks. All right. we've just got a couple pages left, so we'll just be running over a little bit tonight. So, let's get back to it. We'll wrap up this current chapter, have a little bit of a decompress, and wrap up for the evening. By my authority as executive, I threw Merlin into prison, the same cell I had occupied myself. Well, that turned around quickly. Then I gave public notice by herald and trumpet that I should be busy with affairs of state for a fortnight. By about the end of that time, I would take a moment's leisure and blow up Merlin's stone tower by fires from heaven. In the meantime, whoso listened to evil reports about me, let him beware. Furthermore, I would perform but this one miracle at this time, and no more. If it failed to satisfy any murmured, I would turn the murmurers into horses and make them useful. And quiet ensued. I took Clarence into my confidence to a certain degree, and we went to work privately. I told him that this was a sort of miracle that required a trifle of preparation, and that it would be sudden death to ever talk about these preparations to anybody. That made his mouth safe enough. Clandestinely, we made a few bushels of first-rate blasting powder, and I superintended my armorers while they constructed a lightning rod and some wires. This old stone tower was very massive, and rather ruinous, too, for it was Roman, and 400 years old. Yes, and handsomely, after a rude fashion, clothed with ivy from base to summit, as with a shirt of scale mail. It stood on a lonely eminence, in good view from the castle, and about half a mile away. Working by night, we stowed the powder in the tower, dug stones out on the inside, and buried the powder in the walls themselves, which were 15 feet thick at the base. We put in a peck at a time. In a dozen places, we could have blown up the Tower of London with these charges. When the 13th night had come, we put up our lightning rod, bedded it in one of the batches of powder, and ran wires from it to the other batches. Everybody had shunned that locality from the day of my proclamation. But on the morning of the 14th, I thought best to warn the people, through the heralds, to keep clear away, a quarter of a mile away. Then added, by command, that at some time during the 24 hours I would consummate the miracle, but would first give a brief notice, by flags on the castle towers if in the daytime, by torch baskets in the same places if at night. Thunder showers had been tolerably frequent of late, and I was not much afraid of a failure. Still, I shouldn't have cared for a delay of a day or two. I should have explained that I was busy with affairs of state yet, and the people must wait. Of course, we had a blazing sunny day. Almost the first one without a cloud for 3 weeks. Things always happen so. I kept secluded and watched the weather. Clarence dropped in from time to time and said the public excitement was growing and growing all the time, and the whole country filling up with human masses as far as one could see from the battlements. At last, the wind sprang up and a cloud appeared, in the right quarter, too, and just at nightfall. For a little while I watched that distant cloud spread and blacken. Then I judged it was time for me to appear. I ordered the torch baskets to be lit, and Merlin liberated and sent to me. A quarter of an hour later I ascended the parapet, and there found the king and the court assembled and gazing off in the darkness toward Merlin's tower. Already, the darkness was so heavy that one could not see far. These people in the old turrets, being partly in deep shadow and partly in the red glow from the great torch baskets overhead, made a good deal of picture. Merlin arrived in a gloomy mood. I said, "You wanted to burn me alive when I had not done you any harm, and latterly you have been trying to injure my professional reputation. Therefore, I am going to call down fire and blow up your tower. But it is only fair to give you a chance. Now, If you think you can break my enchantments and ward off the fires, step up to the bat. It's your innings. I can, fair sir, and will. Doubt it not. He drew an imaginary circle on the stones of the roof and burnt a pinch of powder in it, which had a small cloud of aromatic smoke, whereat everybody fell back and began to cross themselves and get uncomfortable. Then he began to mutter and make passes in the air with his hands. He worked himself up slowly and gradually into a sort of frenzy, and got to thrashing around with his arms like the sails of a windmill. By this time the storm had about reached us. The gusts of wind were flaring the torches and making the shadows swash about. The first heavy drops of rain were falling. The world abroad was black as pitch. The lightning began to wink fitfully. Of course, my rod would be loading itself now. In fact, things were imminent. So I said, "You have had time enough. I have given you every advantage and not interfered. It is plain your magic is weak. It is only fair that I begin now." I made about 3 passes in the air, and then there was an awful crash, and that old tower leaped into the sky in chunks along with a vast volcanic fountain of fire that turned night to noonday and showed 1,000 acres of human beings groveling on the ground in a general collapse of consternation. Well, it rained mortar and masonry the rest of the week. This was the report, but probably the facts would have modified it. It was an effective miracle. The great bothersome temporary population vanished. There were a good many thousand tracks in the mud the next morning, but they were all outward bound. If I had advertised another miracle, I couldn't have raised an audience with a sheriff. Merlin's stock was flat. The king wanted to stop his wages. He even wanted to banish him, but I interfered. I said he would be useful to work the weather and attend to small matters like that, and I would give him a lift now and then, and when his poor little parlor magic soured on him, there wasn't a rag of his tower left, but I had the government rebuild it for him, and advised him to take boarders, but he was too high-toned for that. And as for being grateful, he never even said thank you. He was a rather hard lot. Take him how you might, but then you couldn't fairly expect a man to be sweet that had been set back so. All right, let's go ahead and set our bookmark here. And get out of our reading nook for the moment. So, this has been the first few chapters of A Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. Now, we've read... Okay, this one is a fun little intersection. We've read Mark Twain before, when we read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. That was really more of a kind of a children's book, but it was also targeted toward nostalgic adult audiences. And it was fun. The antics of a child, you could have the memories of things that you might have done yourself. And we've also read Thomas Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur, the collection of Arthurian legends and lore. And that was pretty dry. Actually, that was really dry. To call a summer's day dry would be a vast understatement as to how dry this was. But it was about as authoritative of a source you can get for Arthurian lore. Yes, I absolutely agree. I think reading this after having read Le Morte d'Arthur is adding so much more nuance, because we're familiar with these characters, and in our previous presentation, it was very serious, very hoity-toity, and like everything was being played across as monumental achievements of chivalry. I think this is also colored by the fact, like, we just recently read Don Quixote, which was a rather light-hearted take on a slightly more modern view of chivalry and the chivalric tales. So we have like 3 different perspectives all aligning together on this one, and it makes the interactions very fun. And then also you take it from the other perspective. Yeah, you take it from the additional perspective of the current trend of like isekai novels and anime and stories that are so in vogue. This is very similar. Yes, it's the same world in the heaviest of air quotes, but being transported to the past, to the realm of legend and myth, not too far off, let's be real. And as he's going to start bringing the magic of modern science and knowledge to the backward peoples that he encounters, is very familiar. So this is kind of a perfect storm to make a very interesting book. And it certainly isn't hurt by the fact that Mark Twain is just so easy to read. He's a very fun author. He's very conversational. The prose, the dialogue, everything is just very earthy, homey. He's not pretentious. He's just fun. Yeah, Army of Darkness is another great example of that sort of thing. So yeah, this had been on my docket for quite a while. I think when I was first looking at Twain, I was looking at a few of his works, and had tabled this one. I don't know why I tabled it. I think it was a little bit longer or something, because this one we're about 14% of the way through after a night, which is not terribly long. We'll finish this in probably 7 or 8 sessions, which is about our average, honestly. But it had gotten tabled, and Akimos brought it back up when I was fishing for suggestions. And you know what? It was time. It was time. So this was the easiest convincing I've had in a very long time to pick up a book. So we'll be returning to this on our Tuesday session, as well as our Friday session. Yeah, it was a very good antidote for Hemingway and the despair we were left with. If this has been a rough year for depressing writings, or depressing readings, we took up Faulkner, and man, did that left us with a sour taste. It was good, but the whole point of Faulkner, all of Faulkner, his entire library, is depression. Hemingway, much the same. Through the course of the work, there's like little bits of ups and downs, but the endings dig deep. And so, between current events being all sorts of bullshit, and the selection of choices that we've had recently being, yes, you're right, the American novel is very heavily influenced by the times, and unfortunately, American history is peppered with what the fuckeries. Case in point, look out your window. What the fuckeries indeed. So, let's look on the bright side and have a little bit of satire and fun with the master of the tongue-in-cheek American novel, Mark Twain. Because sometimes you look outside and think, you know what? Nah, fuck everything. We're gonna have a laugh. I wouldn't have it any other way. All right, guys. So as I was saying, this will be what we're reading on our classics nights for the next week or two. 2 or 3, whatever the case may be. And that will be on our Tuesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. And then on our Thursdays, or not Thursdays, our Sundays, good Lord, Saturdays are our unarchived series readings, where we are probably getting the finishing touches on Hyperion this coming week. So, look forward to these for the upcoming schedule. And we'll hopefully have some fun with this one. Alright, we're going to be wrapping up here. So, a quick reminder. We are always double streaming, both on YouTube and Twitch. On the YouTube side, a subscription to the channel and a like on the stream goes a long way to convincing the algorithm to send us to some new friends. Lets them know that we're doing some fun things, and it's worth spreading the word. If you're over on Twitch, we have just recently made affiliate. I guess I can't say recently for too much longer. It's been a couple weeks, almost a month now. But we are just sort of finding our legs here. We started the channel back in late January, and we are sort of making our way about. I've about figured out how these ads work. They're not too onerous. We were taking about hourly breaks anyway. But if you haven't yet, a follow would be greatly appreciated. We're slowly building our community here. I do my best to interact with chat how we can, but as with most readers, we try to stick to the books. Minimize distractions. But that's for the birds, right? All right. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here for the night. Let's see if there's any friends that are out there reading tonight. I like to have our raids be in the same category. Readers, writers, etc. If we can find friends that are that we've already rated, fantastic. If not, that's also fine. Finding new friends is also a great time. But let's see. Anybody we're following? No, just that guy that we first rated that I don't want to raid back into again. That was a thing. So just writers, or just readers, I should say. That is the problem with Twitch here. I get why they do it, but they combine the reading and the writing in one category. Partly because to split those two genres that are very similar, but to split the two categories would severely water down the population of people trying to get into either of them. So I get it. But it's a little bit annoying when you're trying to go into one side or the other. Okay, so let's see. Someone is reading her own novel. You know what? Let's jump in with Ultra Blue. She said she was getting into reading again, and it looks like she just started. So it will be good to jump over. It looks like she's reading some Jules Verne with Journey to the Center of the Earth. So let's go ahead. We're gonna raid over to Ultra Blue, a channel that we've been following for a while. She reads sometimes. She plays some games. Always a very fun channel to stop in on. So, I ask you to give her our very best as we jump over. And until next time, I hope everyone has a lovely evening, and I hope to see you again next time when we come back on Tuesday to continue Yankee in King Arthur's Court.